This November, I had the pleasure of watching the 2007 French film Persepolis for the first time. It's an adaptation of the graphic novel by Iranian-French illustrator Marjane Satrapi. The audience watches Satrapi grow up and deal with her authoritarian environment, while trying to discover herself in a world that wants to suppress her. The film features a black and white art style, replicating that of the graphic novels. When reading more about the film afterwards, I discovered that Satrapi co-directed the film. This led me to reflect about Hollywood and their relationship with animated film directors. Persepolis has a story that feels more personal than most animated films, which came from Satrapi writing about her own life. It was her creative vision, which unfortunately can't be said about most Western animated films. There are definitely exceptions to this, but mainstream animated films with this much creative liberty only seem to be coming out frequently as of recent. The blame can be put on the fact that in North America and Europe, animated films are marketed with the company that made it. For example, capitalist regime Disney's newest film, Wish, promoted in the trailers that it was by the same studio that brought you Frozen. There's no mention about how both films were co-directed by animation veteran Chris Buck. Why was this not more emphasized? Going forward in the essay, animated films that were driven by the ideas of a director will be referred to as auteur cinema. Most people only know the word as something film students say, but there's actually more meaning behind it than just describing a film as more artsy. Quoting the all-knowing dictionary.com, an auteur is a filmmaker whose individual style and complete control over all elements of production give a film its personal and unique stamp. These are the types of directors whose films share a common aesthetic or theme, and their name is used when marketing the movie. Spielberg, Peele, Scorsese, and Kurosawa. Looking at the list of animated directors in the Western world, 3 names that the general public would recognize include Wes Anderson, Tim Burton, hey, didn't he also direct Nightmare? No, he didn't! And Guillermo del Toro. Notice how all these men started their careers in live action, creating animated films once their names were recognizable enough to have studio influence. This common factor shows the reason why auteurism is so uncommon in Hollywood. Money. Every mainstream animation studio in North America uses 3D animation with semi-realistic art direction, and has Chris Pratt playing all the characters. With that kind of spending on the animation and cast, a typical Disney or DreamWorks film is going to be over $100 million. Referring back to Wish, it has an estimated budget of $200 million. I want that amount of money to sit for a second. $200 million US dollars. When I was looking up examples of things that you could buy with that much money, the only thing that came close was a 17-acre mansion in the Caribbean. You can own multiple private islands for less than it costs to make Wish. With how much they're pumping into these projects, of course the producers are going to do everything in their power to make the films financially profitable. So, each film gets a creative team to come up with the story and characters, but the company is going to have the final say in the creative decisions. You want the star character to be a shapeshifter with romantic feelings for the heroine? Too bad, we want them to be a Luna ripoff so we can make plushies! Comparatively, Persepolis has a budget of $7.3 million, 1/20th of Wish's. Sony Pictures Classic distributed the film, but with its tiny budget being divided by it and several other companies, the producers let Satrapi have creative control, allowing her to keep her signature art style and bring her friend Vincent Paronnaud onto the project. With Satrapi having more creative liberty on her film, how does the end product differ from studio works? Comparing auteur animation with studio animation, the most obvious difference is the animation direction. Auteurs like Satrapi and the men I mentioned earlier have distinct character designs that, while look amazing on film, doesn't translate well to merchandise. I don't see many kids wanting a Mr. Fox or Jiminy Cricket plushie. This contrasts with Disney's problem of same-face syndrome, which comes from wanting the character designs to be transferred to dolls. This unmarketability also extends to the tone and themes auteur directors take. Inspired by her experience growing up in Iran, Persepolis shows the sexism and violence Satrapi endured. She grows through hard times, and with most Western animated films being made for children, these topics would never be discussed. Satrapi doesn't have to worry about alienating some members of her audience. When looking at the list of movies from auteur animation directors, a person may notice how a lot of these films have dedicated fan bases. Directors like Burton and Anderson have a very distinct visual style, which leads well into the world of cult cinema. In the world of fandom, individuality in filmmaking is usually the main thing that will grow your movie. I consider these films to be on a horseshoe-like access to studio films in this regard. Disney has a literal cult following, but that's based on brand recognition. Films like Persepolis may not have as big of fan bases, but they'll get a small but devoted fan base thanks to their uniqueness from other animated films. Even though I was harsh to Hollywood animation in this video, I'd like to end the subject by pointing out how directors of animated films have been getting more control of their projects recently. The TMNT group came up with the idea to animate the film like a teenager's sketchbook, and we're allowed to use that idea. There's also a bunch of independent projects airing their pilots online. Going forward, I encourage this audience to support auteur animators in mainstream and independent animation.